Okay. So Mr. Philip Larkin comes across as the simplest poet, but by the end of these two classes, you'd realize that he is not so simple. If you follow the idea that I give you about understanding the socio-politics behind the text and the author, you would have realized that Philip Larkin was writing after the World Wars, Second World War. Most of the poets that we have in paper 2, whether it's W.H. Auden, T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, let's not talk about Ramanujan at the moment, but 3 poets, they are writing around the world wars. Philip Larkin, Samuel Beckett, their writing is post-war writing. And there is a distinctness in the post-war literature and the post-war culture, because the 2 world wars, they were the biggest socio-political, cultural, economic events of the world in that century. So the impact of those 2 events is everywhere in our syllabus. At least a lot of the texts that we'll be reading, they are seething with the modernism that is very much impacted by the world wars. So as you'll be reading more texts and you'll be reading behind and around those texts, you'll gain an understanding of what modernism is. You'll gain an understanding of that socio-political era, and it'll build. So I'm not asking you to go and know everything about the first 50 years of the 20th century. Go and read about modernism. We'll understand modernism. Now, this text is not a modern text. This is a post-war text. But of course, Philip Larkin was born in 1922. He saw the Second World War. He grew up in that time. He read those poets and those authors. He understood modernism. He lived modernism in literature and culture. So it is bound to be very natural that some of it would seep through in his writing. And there is a very prominent question that we'll look at, which talks about why Philip Larkin did not believe in using the myths, using the symbols, the metaphors, the very typical elements, features of the modern writing. We talk about that. But it is important to understand that he grew up during that era. So that impact would be there somehow in his writing. Similarly, when we talk about the modern writers like Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, D.H. Lawrence, T.S. Eliot, even W.H. Auden, they all grew up during the Victorian times, right? And most of them saw both the wars. So when they grew up during the Victorian times, one of the major reasons of modernism as a literary movement was to do away with the Victorian style of literature. So on one hand, it was one literary movement is kind of a breaking away from the previous one. And Virginia Woolf said it that they had to find something new, newer ways of making sense of the new world that we are living in now, the unprecedented world of the 20th century, which was very different from the world of the Victorian age. So Philip Larkin was writing after the wars, and he was a very atypical poet that he would not go to a lot of poetic readings. He led a very quiet life. He was a librarian at Queen's University in Belfast, which is in Ireland, Northern Ireland. I've been to this university. In fact, I've seen his big portrait, big bust there. And then he was librarian at the University of Hull, which is in England. So he led a quiet life. He had very specific ideas about poetry and life. He was very specific about not making it complicated. But as I said, make no mistake, his poems are far from simple. They might be the shortest poems, but they are probably as intense as Paradise Lost, which is 10 books. So we have these 5 poems in our syllabus: Deceptions, Days, Afternoons, Next Please, and Mr. Bleeny. Eric Homburger, and this quote has come as a question. If you've read any PYQs, that he describes him as the saddest heart in the post-war supermarket. And he was, his writing was termed, as Charles Tomlinson said, that the writing has a tenderly nursed sense of defeat. So not a very optimistic outlook on his poetry. When you read his poems, and most of the poems that we have in the syllabus, Deceptions, Mr. Bleeny, Days, Afternoons, Next Please, you sense a deep sense of pessimism and disillusionment, right? And if you would have read about Philip Larkin, you would understand. That's why it is important to understand about the life of an author, so that you can connect the dots with his or her writing. So he did not believe in the presence of God or the existence of God. So lack of religious faith sometimes translates into his poems as being very atheist and pessimist. There is a very famous poem called Church Going that you should read. It's a small poem again. It's in most of the syllabuses. If some of you might have done it in your syllabus. Ria, I think it's in the BA syllabus in DU, Church Going. And Ira Singh.
Yes, it was in my school syllabus also.
School as well. And Ira Singh taught this. Philip Larkin is her favorite author, favorite poet. So Church Going is a very beautiful poem. You should read it. His poems might come across as bleak views of human life, pointless struggle and irony of all effort. That you can connect with the idea of existentialism and the absurdism that was the primary literary movement after the war, which we talk about. Death and the existence of death, the existence of ending, is the primary emotion that you feel in most of his poems. And urban life, the urban living, like in Mr. Bleeny, Deceptions, you see that shallow, hollow bleakness of the urban life whenever the poem is set in an urban setting. It's in Afternoons, it's in Mr. Bleeny, it's also in Deceptions. Now, each of Larkin's poem is crafted to be its own soul, freshly created universe. That is the primary quality or feature of Philip Larkin's poetry. And he did it deliberately. This question is very much works in tandem with this question, the previous one. Larkin doesn't believe in myth, kitty, tradition, and other forms of external allusions in his poetry. This question and this question. Each of Larkin's poems is crafted to be its own soul, freshly created universe. These two questions are two sides of the same coin. And within these two questions, you understand Larkin's poetry in its entirety. And these two questions have been asked by UPSC, and several variations of these questions have been asked and will be asked. So first of all, what does it mean that each of his poems is, every poem is a soul, freshly created universe? And what does this mean that he doesn't believe in myth, kitty, tradition, and other forms of external allusions? So in fact, this second question is the response to the first one. It's kind of an explanation of the first one. What does it mean to call a poem a soul, freshly created universe? It means that it is not alluding externally to any other poem or any other reference outside of itself. It is not following any mythological tradition or classical tradition like T.S. Eliot does, W.B. Yeats does, W.H. Auden does. It is not following any tradition. Now, to understand this single word tradition, you'll have to read an essay by T.S. Eliot that would help you in understanding a lot of modernism. You can note it down. It's called The Tradition and the Individual Talent by T.S. Eliot. It's called The Tradition and the Individual Talent. So what does this mean? That each of his poems are freshly created universe. One, they do not externally allude to anything else. When you read Larkin's poem, you do not need to have any understanding of any literary style or tradition. They would be symbols and metaphors and figures of speech, but they would not require any external or specific literary knowledge. Right? They would be biblical references, but they would be simple enough so that anyone can decode them. Mythological references he does not give. He does not allude to any myth kitty. Myth kitty is a phrase that is used specifically for W.B. Yeats. Larkin does not do that. Why he does not do that? Because he wanted each of his poem to be its own universe, inherent everything within that poem, all those lines. And this is what he says about this, that I have no belief in tradition or a common mythicity or casual allusions in poems to other poems or poets. And the gentility principle, this question was once asked in the 60s, where poems were purely original with comprehensible language, ordinary diction, colloquial style, stark realism, empirical and rational. Okay. Even though Larkin is generally considered to be a nihilist, do you think he attempts to build up a world against nothingness? Going back to that idea of pessimism and the sense of ending, sense of everything, Larkin has been considered a nihilist. I don't know whether you understand what a nihilist is. But this again is an important concept when it comes to Larkin. So when we are doing Larkin, one is about, there are two kinds of questions that UPSC asks, or primarily two kinds of literary questions in literature. One would be stylistics, and one would be about form and matter of that poem, about the content, if we say it simply. So stylistics question would be about the technicalities of the poem itself, the technical aspects of the poem, the literary aspects, technical aspects, like the previous two questions, that he does not believe in mythicity, his poems are solely freshly created universe. Now, the questions about content, form, and matter also involve the author or poet's ideology, the way he or she thinks, the way he or she is. So this is that question. So the questions about the poet or the author, or the questions about the technical aspects of the text. In the technical aspects, you'd have about the characters, you have about the plot, you have about the critical assessment of such and such, the symbolism of, like in Passage to India, the symbolic significance of the three parts, the structure of the text and all that. And then the form and matter, the content question would be about E.M. Foster's liberal dilemma, or the post-colonial aspects reading of the text. So this is about how Larkin was. Was it a nihilist? Was it a pessimist? Was he the saddest heart in the post-war supermarket? So these are the questions about the poets, about the way he thinks, about his ideology. And then the stylistics questions would be separate. In some paper to text, in paper one syllabus, you would very rarely get stylistics questions. Those questions are primarily about the text and the content and the form, sometimes about the author. But in paper two, we have a lot of technical aspects in each of the texts. So we get good healthy mix of both kinds of questions. While we were talking about nihilism, so let's understand what was happening at that time. You might have heard of a famous philosopher, German philosopher, writer, thinker, Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche, I'll read it from the screen, asserts that with the decline of Christianity and the rise of physiological decadence, nihilism is in fact characteristic of the modern age. He's referring to the Second World War and the age after that, though he implies that the rise of nihilism is still incomplete and that it has yet to be overcome. Nietzsche characterized nihilism as emptying the world and especially human existence of meaning, purpose, comprehensible truth, or essential value. Nietzsche discusses Christianity, one of the major topics in his work, at length in the context of the problem of nihilism in his notebooks in a chapter entitled European Nihilism. Here he states that the Christian moral doctrine provides people with intrinsic value, belief in God, which justifies the evil in the world, and a basis for objective knowledge. In this sense, in constructing a world where objective knowledge is possible, Christianity is an antidote against a primal form of nihilism, against the despair of meaninglessness. Now, what is nihilism? A nihilist does not believe in any system. If you say any political system, any political ideology, religious ideology, religious system, a nihilist basically says that there is no meaning to human existence. And it collides very closely with the idea of existentialism, which we'll read when we'll do Samuel Beckett's play, Waiting for Godot. So a nihilist can be somebody who says, like Philip Larkin would say, that there is nothing else to life than what you experience and see. There is no God above, there is no Satan, there is no inherent structure or a system in this world or life. It is what it is. I would not give it any meaning or any definition or any category. I would not try to make sense of it. Right? While the religions, the organized religions or the organized doctrines, be it political doctrines, ideologies, left, right, center, or the organized religions like Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, or whatever religion, they set forth a set of doctrines. And what is the purpose of any organized religion is to make sense of this world and this life. A human being does not understand why the pain exists. For example, the burning starting question for Gautam Buddha. Why suffering exists, why pain exists, why evil exists in the world, and is there any hope? And so the religious organizations or organized religions, they give theoretical, long, answers to those systematically. That is why theology is a branch of study in the West, study of religions. Like in Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma, we have the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, the Puranas, the Upanishads, so much of literature. Every religion has that. Nihilist says, I do not believe in any of that because I don't need it. So there is one thing to be an atheist, denying the existence of God. There is another thing, being not just the agnostic, but another thing, that I don't need a definition. I'm not denying it or rejecting it or ignoring it. I'm just saying I believe there is no meaning to existence. There is not supposed to be any meaning to what you're doing, any purpose. That nobody has given you a divine purpose to do this with your life, which is what most religions tell you to do that. So a nihilist is saying there is no purpose given to you. There is no meaning that you're going to seek or find. There is nothing to comprehend. There are no absolute values. That's what a nihilist is saying. And you might find a lot of people like that in your life, right? It is very hard to argue with a nihilist, because somebody who does not believe in any definition, any value system, any structure, it is what logic do you give him or her? Right? So this is something about nihilism, which we'll try to understand from the poems. And I'll okay, now we have, can you see the poem? Next, please.
Yes, sir.
We'll start with the poem. So does that make sense, what I've talked about so far? And what do you understand about the idea of nihilism? And okay, let's start with a simpler question first. This whole thing about Philip Larkin being the saddest heart or pessimistic and disappointing poems, nihilism. What did you feel when you read the poems? So you can tell me one by one, starting with Anjali.
Hey, hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. What you're talking about nihilism and the sense of disillusionment, I felt while reading Philip Larkin. Like we often have this fear of the mediocrity, but we our mind often run away with that from that thought. But Larkin addressed it in his poem. Similar way with the deception poem. We know the cruel crime, but we often try to uh, uh, see the better picture rather than going into the dark, stark reality. And Larkin just bring back the attention of the reader to these points. That's what I felt.
Right, right. Okay, good. Ria?
Yes, sir, the poems did seem very sad, depressing. It just seems like there's in the poem Next, Please, I think he says, there's no, we are always waiting for the future, and when the future comes, it does not even satisfy us. So the only true thing in life is death. So it's kind of depressing. And
Okay.
the deception poem was a bit, it was very dark for me because I don't know whether I interpreted the last lines correctly. It seems like he says that the person who is perpetrating the crime is suffering more of a disillusionment than the person it has been perpetrated on. So that was very dark.
Yep, yep, yep. Good. Okay, Shivam.
So Larkin's successes in convincing us of a depressing philosophical approach, like everything that he is suggesting appears correct even after it being dark. So it's some sort of like a depressing sense being dominated over his poems.
Okay. Ranbir.
Yes, sir. I was going to actually ask why all his writings are so sadistic. Of course, when he writes about the bad things or something even happening, that is understandable. But when he talks about kids playing in the park and basically in a situation like that, even then he's questioning like what is the point in all this?
Okay. Okay, so most of you agree that what you read seems to be a stark reality, but it is just too dark. It might be true, but the perspective seems a little disillusioned and pessimist. Okay, let's read and see if that's the case. Okay. Always too eager for the future, we pick up bad habits of expectancy. Something is always approaching, Every day, till then, we say, watching from a bluff the tiny. The lines are missing. Do we have a proper text of it? The missing lines. Okay, I'll read it from my phone. You have the text, right, with you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, always too eager for the future, we pick up bad habits of expectancy. Something is always approaching every day, till then we say, watching from a bluff the tiny, clear, sparkling armada of promises draw near. How slow they are, and how much time they waste, refusing to make haste. Yet, till the levers holding wretched stalks of disappointment for, though nothing balks, each big approach, leaning with brasswork print, with each rope distinct. Flagged and the figurehead with golden tits arching our way, it never anchors. It's no sooner present than it turns to past, right to the last. We think each one will heave to and unload all good into our lives, all we are owed for waiting so devoutly and so long. But we are wrong. Only one ship is seeking us, a black-sailed unfamiliar, towing at her back a huge and birdless silence. In her wake, no waters breed or break. So, the second line, when he says we pick up bad habits of expectancy, what do you think he is referring to? What do we expect? What does he think people expect?
Something good in the future.
Something good in the future. And why do we think that something good is coming to us?
Because people are usually
we are hopeful.
optimistic.
Because we are unsatisfied with our present life, that's why we're always expecting to
Yes.
for something better.
Yes. Write that down. That's the crux of this poem. So, there are two ways to look at this poem. One way is the literal way that we read, and basically he's saying we are expecting the future to bring us the good. And he's saying, dude, don't worry about that. The future is not going to give you any good. You think the future is bringing, using the metaphor of the ships, that the next ship is going to bring you something good, because the last stanza, second last stanza, for waiting so devoutly and so long. Now think about your own lives. We think that God owes us because we waited so long. ये क्या बात हुई? Because we've been in grief for so long, the next moments would bring us happiness. That's not how it happens. That is one way of looking at it, that he is basically criticizing people that we are expecting the next moment to bring us happiness, but that's not going to happen. That is not certain. The only certainty is death. The only certain ship is the ship of death. Right? That's one way of looking at it. That's how most people would look at. The second way is what you just said, Anjali. He's simply telling us that the next moment is not going to give you happiness if you're not happy in the present moment. If you're already not on that ship, then the next ship is not going to give you what you want. The habit of expectancy is pushing you out into the future that does not exist. So in a way, it is a very a very meditative poem. This is an entire uh, idea of mindfulness, the idea of dhyan. Let's look at it again. Always too eager for the future. We pick up bad habits of expectancy. Something is always approaching. Every day, till then we say. Watching from a bluff, the tiny, clear, sparkling armada of promises draw near. Promises in the future. Now this whole imagery of the ship full of goodies coming towards your way, unloading the goodness into your life, as if you're standing on a beach. And the whole idea of ships coming back home, as if you deserve it. You have a right to it. They're coming to you, but you don't get it. And you continue the loop. The next one would come, the next one would come, the next one would come. Like a mad woman who waited for her dead husband, that the next ship would bring her home, the next one would bring her home, the next one would bring her home. The soldier was dead a long time ago in a war, but she continued to wait. Now, because she has waited so long, does she deserve that the husband would come back finally? No, the reality is he's dead. No ship is coming. That's not certain. That's all he's saying. He's not saying it is not happening, goodies are not coming to you, but he's saying that is not certain, but the habit of expectancy make us believe that it is certain. It is going to happen one day. Tomorrow, in the future, it is going to happen. The third stanza, the fourth one, flagged. The third one, yet still they leave us holding wretched stocks of disappointment. Every time a ship comes, unloads no goodies, wretched stocks of disappointment. Who can tell me what figure of speech is this? Wretched stocks of disappointment. Holding wretched stocks of disappointment. Is it a simile? Is it a metaphor? Is it a synecdoche? Ria?
It's a metaphor.
Okay. Metaphor for what?
He's using the word wretched stocks for no goodies.
Like the stale flowers, right?
Yes, sir.
Stalks, because stalks are stalks of stems of flowers, rose stalks or daffodil stalks, and these are wretched, no good. So even though we get these wretched stalks of disappointment every time, with every big approach is with every next moment. Title is Next Please. So we just continue to say next please with every next moment, big approach. The ships, again the ships metaphor, leaning with brasswork print, each rope distinct, flagged and the figured with golden tits. So very clearly describing the ship arching our way. It never anchors. Now what? So we understood the metaphor of the ship, but what does the metaphor of ship signify? What is it? What does it mean? It never anchors. What ship never anchors?
Is it time?
It's a time.
Yes, the ship of time. Time never anchors. We feel that the next one would come and then we'll get it and we'll be done and dusted, but it never stops. The sooner, like he says, no sooner present than it turns to past. No sooner present than it turns to past. So what was just a future a moment ago travels through present and becomes past. So the ship has gone past basically. Each rope distinct, flagged in the figure with golden threads arching our way, it never anchors. It's no sooner present than it turns to past, right to the last. We think each one will heave to and unload all good into our lives. This is what we expect. Why? Because we think we are owed for waiting so devoutly and so long. There might be a slight reference to religion here. There might be a slight reference to his nihilist idea, and he's referring and critiquing these value systems, because these value systems teach you this, that you prayed for so long, you've been a good person for so long, now you deserve something good, it's coming to you, it's coming to you. That's the promise most organized religions give you, right? But then he comes back to the last one. Only one ship is seeking us. A black-sailed unfamiliar, towing at her back a huge and birdless silence. In her wake, no waters breed or break. Now, as you guessed, it could be the ship of death. The only certainty is that ship. And that ship has nothing. That ship is not bringing any gifts. There is a silence with it. Now, what is the last line telling you? In a wake, no waters breed or break. How do waters breed or waters break? What's the reference here?
So when there's death, there's just silence. There's nothing else.
Yeah, but the last line, in a wake, no waters breed or break.
So I think water usually define the life. There is a life inside of water, and a break is like the movement of the water, the waves, I think, and in the depth there is nothing. There's complete silence, stillness of the water.
And when the waters break, when the water break, what happens? Think. It's a very
Sir, I think
common saying.
wake is the track that a ship leaves behind in the water. So maybe it means nothing behind that.
Waters breed or waters break. It's a very common phrase. Just think about how do you use this phrase, water break, water broke.
So pregnancy, when the water
Yes.
breaks.
Yes. So birth, breed and break, birth and life. In a wake, no waters breed or break. There is no birth. There is no reincarnation. There is no next birth. That's it. The end of it. Over. Game over. So what do we do? So what is he telling us? He told you that
he doesn't believe in heaven or hell after that.
He does not believe in any system that promises you that the future or the next moment is bringing you something. He's very clearly telling you that the future, the next moment, the next ship, it's not bringing you anything, as is promised by your religions or your ideologies. There is no heaven. There are no 72 hoods in heaven. There is no next birth. If you do good karmas in this birth, you will get the credit, get all that karmas credited to the next one. He's saying it ends here. So what do we do if it ends here? So one way of looking at it, he's just saying you that this is all bullshit, but he's posing a question, posing a scenario, posing a situation. But what does what is he actually telling us? Okay, this is the problem. But how do we solve this? Because if we look at it, this is a very nihilist, this is a very pessimist, very dark scenario. But is he giving us any solution to this? Is he telling you what we should be doing instead?
Start living in present.
Yes.
Living it in the present.
So this technique is called something where you paint the inverse situation and force people to think of what instead. So instead of telling you what instead, what should you do instead, he's telling you that this is the problem you're making. This is the diagnosis. If you understand the problem really well, you'll know what to do. Right? So he's giving you a snapshot. One ship is seeking us, a black sailed unfamiliar, towing at our back a huge and birdless silence. That one ship could very well be the death, which is the eventual outcome of a human life. But he's writing about this in the present continuous, that one ship is seeking us. So it's not like death is chasing you every moment. Right? It's a very scary thought if you look at it that way. So only one ship is seeking us. Now, because ship refers to time, and previously he has used the metaphor of ship as time for the future moments turning into past. No sooner than the present come, no sooner than it becomes present, it turns to past. So if we follow his logic, ship equals time. Previously, he's talked about ship equals future moments turning into past. Can this ship in the last stanza refers to the present moment? Instead of thinking about it as death, can you think about this as the present moment? Only one ship is seeking us. The ship of the present moment. And it's not bringing you any gifts. A black sailed unfamiliar. It is unfamiliar. Now, there is a difference between the ships that we have been expecting, the goodies that we have been expecting. He described those ships in details. Because when we are expecting something, good to happen to us, we have the details with us. But the present moment is a completely mysterious, unknown. It has never happened before. Every present moment is a completely new moment. It never happened before. But because we are so stuck in this cycle of past to future, we are never in a present moment. We never acknowledge it. That is the entire essence of Dhyan Yoga. In the present moment is all there is. Eckhart Tolle, if anyone's read Eckhart Tolle, he wrote books like The Power of Now, Power of Presence and all. Every spiritual master from the East, from Gautam Buddha to Osho, everyone's talked about this. All meditation is about this, situating yourself in the present moment. And in the present moment is a black sailed unfamiliar. There is nothing in it because you're not expecting, you're not projecting anything in it. That is why it is the present moment. And there is a silence in it. Osho described present moment as here and now. The whole essence of Osho's meditation is here and now. Here as in physically here and mentally here in the now. That's meditation. If you're studying here, if you're listening to my lecture, if you're 100% here, physically and mentally and emotionally, you are in a meditative state of present. If not for a split second, Your attention is drawn somewhere else, not for a split second. Every second, you are absolutely 100% here. A lot of people in the West, psychologists have written about the power of presence, the power of now. This present moment, here and now. That's it. That is where all the manifestations happen. And it's manifestations do not happen in the future moment, because future does not exist. They happen in the now. If you can feel something, the law of attraction, if you can feel something in this present moment, as if it's real, it has the power to manifest in the future. But if you feel that it is coming from the future, that the ship is bringing, that's why he's using those metaphors of ships, because you can expect them to approach towards you. They're coming slowly towards you. A future movement, as if it's a linear curve, something from there coming to me, going past. In that process, you missed out on the present, the power of the present. So here and now is a state of nothingness in the Eastern tradition, in the Indian tradition. This is a state where nothing happens. It's a blank slate. And there, in our wake, no waters breed or break. There's nothing happening here. That's the meditative state. Then you will be asking, if that's the meditative state and then nothing happens in that moment, then what's the point? That's the point. Because we are never in the present. We are always either in the past or the future. It could be the next moment or it could be the previous moment. While you're listening to me, you might be checking your messages, you might be looking at your desk, you might be thinking about the next class or the previous class, or the words that I am speaking, they're taking you out mentally somewhere else, but you're not 100% here ever. So when you meditate, and for example, mantra meditation, mantra is, they can have meanings, they cannot have meanings. You're chanting a mantra, the whole idea is to situate you in that moment, focus on the sound, so that your mind gets busy with that sound and chanting. So the possibility of distracting is little. If you just close your eyes and sit and try to be in the present, it is incredibly difficult. The moment you'll close your eyes, thousands of snapshots of the thoughts would pass through your head. And before you know it, you will be following those train of thoughts. And then moments would pass. Then you will realize, oh, I was supposed to meditate. Then what do I do in meditation? You just try and sit and find that blank stage where there are no thoughts. You say, okay, let me try again. You sit back, you close your eyes. You probably do it for a couple of seconds, and then you're bombarded with thoughts. And you again take that train of thoughts. So we use the example of train of thoughts. He's used the example of ships. One ship approaching, gone. Another approaching, gone. We're looking there, not here and now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now, is it pessimistic? Is it disillusioned? Is it nihilist? It's because his way of outlining and defining the problem scenario as he looks at it is so stark. He's not patronizing you. He's not making it in a flowery language. He's not using beautiful metaphors, or he's just saying it as it is. And then he's leaving you to think about it. Now it is up to you. You can say, he's saying, why are you worried about the future? Why are you thinking about the future? Nothing is happening. The only thing certain is death. You will look at it that way. Or he's telling you, see, the ship that you are seeking is the future ship that does not exist except your imagination. The only ship that is certain and that is also seeking you is the present moment. And that ship is nothing like what you expect. That's a problem. Because you expect with all those details, aisa hoga. But you're never in the present moment. So what happens, I'm digressing a bit, but what happens when you meditate, or what happens, There's a beautiful word in Sanskrit for meditation called dhyan. It's a very beautiful word. It took me so many years to understand the essence of dhyan. बचपन में parents would say कि ध्यान से पढ़ना, ध्यान से एग्जाम करना, ध्यान से ये करना, ध्यान रखना. And our meditation technique is simply called dhyan. So when you close your eyes and you do dhyan, all you're doing is you're trying to witness how your mind is working. And even if you look at it from Western perspective, the whole idea of meditation for them is to stop the mind from thinking for some moments and make a practice where you can do this at will. That becomes mindfulness. So what happens when you can control your mind, not control, but manage your mind, is you would not fall for the negative emotions, anger, lust, envy, hatred, regrets, fears. You would not fall for them, because as soon as those emotions would come and overpower you, you can be mindful and you understand that I can let them go like the ship. I have that power to let these emotions go. They're not stuck, because this ship never anchors. So if fear comes, anger comes, whatever comes, this is what a yogi knows, a meditator knows. That if the fear comes to me, if acute sadness comes to me, it is not going to anchor, but we feel it is going to, just get hold of us and we'll become this. But a yogi knows that it'll go. It's not going to anchor. A meditator knows that. So even from Western perspective, a meditation is just about trying to manage your mind. And that happens when you start to witness it. Now, let's not go into that debate of who is going to witness what. If we are witnessing our mind, then who the hell we are? Who the hell are we? Because in a witnessing situation, you need two, an object and a subject, an observer and the observed. So who's observing who? That is a long discussion. We'll do some other day. But this is, I hope this makes sense to you. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let's move on to the next one. Days. What are days for? Days are where we live. They come, they wake us time and time over. They are to be happy in. They are to be happy in. Where can we live but days? Solving that question brings the priest and the doctor in their long coats running over the fields. So what do you make of this poem? Anjali.
So in the first paragraph, it's a very positive vibe it's giving. It's like a parent asking a child and asking, what do you think about what days are for? But in the second paragraph, the tone suddenly changes, and the priest and the doctor, it believes it's symbolizes the age-old conflict about religion and science. So
Yeah.
let's solve the question what the day is if science and religion would have a field day over it if we let them to answer this question.
Yep. Good enough. Yes. Yes. Ria.
Yes, it's exactly like Anjali said. I interpreted it in the same way. He, in the first paragraph, he says that it sounds like what he said in the previous poem, that we need to live in the present. We are supposed to live in the present. And if when man keeps on thinking, overthinks about it, where can we live? So the second paragraph seems like a sarcastic answer to that, overthinking about it, makes science and religion come in conflict.
Okay, yeah, good enough. Shivam.
So this poem is simply representing the innocence of the poet, like he is just saying that the days are where we live, whereas he is in the another stanzas saying that the expert cannot decipher this simple idea of the day. So he is just contradicting the that the innocence is much more realistic and approachable than the scientific aspects as well as the religional aspect.
Okay. Yeah, Ranbir.
Yes, sir. I will going to say the same. In first
Hmm.
stanza, you understand that it definitely relates to the last point. The days are there we live. So we just maybe make the best use of our present. But if we try to involve ourselves in some sort of ideology or science or make it too complicated, then it will ruin our day. The time that
Yeah.
we are enjoying.
When do we also have both the priest and the doctor in our lives at the same time? At what occasions?
On deathbed.
Yes.
And also at the birth? Yeah, at least in the Christian, they get baptized, not exactly at the birth, but right in the beginning. And definitely at the death. Yeah. So science and religion, yes, trying to fight over this question. What are days for? Now, there is a concept of time and space. So we normally feel that we live spatially in space, and time is something that, I don't know, defines our lives. But he's kind of mixed that all up, and he's saying, what are days for? What are days as in time, or days also spatially, physically, mentally? We live in time and space, and that's it. These days are where we live, and they come, they wake us time and time over. They are to be happy in. Where can we live but days? Solving that question, like you all said, that it has been made complicated. All the philosophies, theologies have been written about life. Now, what is life? What is human life? Human life is to be lived. How do you live? I think the smallest unit could be a moment, or the extrapolated version of a moment is a day. So as you said, the age-old question of philosophy, philosophers and theologists and thinkers and politicians and ideologists have been, what is life about? Again, a hint of nihilism, that all these definitions, all these ideas of what life is supposed to be, how should we live your life, they're just complicating it. Life is to be lived in days, and days is, you get a day, then the next day, then the next day. And what do we do with these days? They are to be happy in. So this is not a disappointing and disillusioned poem. He's basically saying that you are free to live happily. And if you want to overcomplicate your life, then swing between science and religion, priest and the doctor. These two people kind of start your life and end your life. They are there at the beginning of it, and they are there at the end of it. So what is there between? So basically, he might be saying that, dudes, leave us. You started our life, baptized, doctor brought us to life. At the death, you'd be there. बीच का हिस्सा हमारे लिए छोड़ दो. This is the middle part. This is the life. This is what the day is for. Don't ruin these days, the life, with your overcomplicated philosophies and value systems. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's look at your answers. Question 1. Can you see the question? This is Anjali's question, is it? Answer? Can you
Yes,
see
sir.
this? Yeah. What happened in the caves? Cave section, 150 words. The cave is the central section of the novel where the core events of the novel occurs. The first was the visit to Malabar caves and how it affected both the women differently. The second was the trial of Dr. Aziz, which changes the dynamics of the British and Indian relationship. Okay. Mrs. Moore and Adela were deeply affected by the gate of Miss very now. She lived the power of making distinction between power and love, everything. Okay. Not a bad answer actually for the first answer. This is a good length for 150 word because in the exam you're not supposed to just calculate and count your words. So for 150 words is 2 pages, 2 sides of a page or 2 pages. What happened in the cave? The cave is the central section of the novel where the core events of the novel occurs. Okay. The very first statement of your answer has to be the most powerful and strong and confident. And it should directly attack the question. So remember in school when we were taught Jim lives, excuse me, the Jim lives over the mountain. So the question is, where does Jim live? And the answer is Jim lives over the mountain. That's it. Right? So what happened in the cave? You're saying cave is a central section of the novel. So if you were to write one sentence answer to this question, what happened in the cave section? What would be your one sentence? This would not fit. This is not a bad start. This is not a bad start. But to make it better, we should always aim for the very first statement to directly attack the question in the first statement. What happened in the cave section? Do you understand, Anjali, what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. So should I start with like Adela was assaulted? So first sentence. So could you give the example? Like how should?
Like in the last part, it appears that there is the intention of the author and the reader come away from cave sequence with an impression of muddle and a sense of inexplicable mystery. This is what happened in the caves, according to your answer. So the last concluding part, you make a sentence, what happened in the caves? This is what happened in the caves. If you can write this in one sentence. In the cave section, the author presented us a situation that was not clear, but that could be deliberate because he wanted to give that impression of muddle and a sense of inexplicable mystery. Does that make sense? And then you talk
Yes,
about
sir.
2 things. The first was the visit to Malabar caves and how it affected both the women. The second was the trial of Dr. Aziz. Right?
Yes, sir.
Now you describe these 2 incidents. Good. Then you are describing these 2 incidents one by one. You have to try and cut down as many redundant words as possible to make your writing tighter. For example, later part of the cave section deals with how. Instead of all these words, you can say in the trial section, this is what happens. Instead of the whole first line and the half of the second line, in the trial section. Right?
Yes, sir.
That will come with practice because we only have 150 words and we have to make every word count. This is not a bad answer. To start with, short notes are a little tricky to do, trickier than the long ones. Is it impossible to be friends? How does Foster suffer from liberal dilemma in a colonial setup while exploring the general theme? Whether it is possible to be friends with English, this question is the major vehicle for the entire novel. It was first raised in the discussion between Emil and Lara. Okay. This answer is a classic case of missed intro. So what is the question again? How does Foster suffer from liberal dilemma in a colonial setup? And have you tackled this in the first page? It took you next page to even use the word liberal humanist. Does it make sense? Exactly what I was saying before. You read the question, the last part of the question. How does Foster suffer from liberal dilemma in a colonial setup while exploring the general theme? So general theme, according to the question, is theme of friendship. So how does he suffer from liberal dilemma? It should come right here. Do you understand what's wrong?
Yes, sir. The redundancy, the overused word.
No, no. You have to answer this question. How does Foster suffer from
First,
liberal dilemma?
okay.
Right here.
Okay.
That is the core of your argument. Right here.
Okay.
And it would take practice. Let's do other answers as well from others, and then I'll talk about, because this is the problem of 99% of the students. This is the problem of 99% of writing. Because what I am asking you to do is the most difficult part of the answer. I'm asking you to put together the first sentence or the first paragraph of your answer that basically answers the entire question in full. This is your strongest argument. And when you start writing, whenever you start writing, anyone who just starts writing an answer, it's like we are starting a car and this is the first gear, then the second gear. We bring to the most important parts of our answer in the second or third or fourth paragraph. It has to be right at the top, and that requires thinking, reverse thinking. You don't start with the generalist stuff. You start with the most important stuff that you have, the most important argument. And then you build that argument with proofs. Then you give examples. So you basically think about it for a minute then. Then you start writing. Do not just start writing and then think. Right? We do not have time for this. All this has a place in your answer, but later. So the structure is just topsy-turvy. I read the entire page and I don't know where you have told me nothing about the liberal dilemma. That's the actual question. How he suffers from liberal dilemma. Right?
Yes,
Makes
sir.
sense to everyone?
Yes.
And I promise you, I would be telling the same thing again and again and again and again. And you'd still be doing the same mistake again and again and again until you get it. One day you will get it, and that's it. Then you don't need me. E.M. Foster, as a liberal, did a study of India as a colony, discussed the complexity of colonial discourses in his narrative. In the 20s England, E.M. Foster was faced with the challenge of publishing a British colonial novel with an essential liberal perspective under the conservative eyes of the European public. As a result, he could neither write a scathing indictment of colonialism, nor could he legitimize the British branch. Okay. Oh. First of all, was he actually writing a British colonial novel with a liberal perspective? We are assuming it. Right?
Yes, sir.
This is not a bad start, but you're making it sound as if he was given this project. This is what you have to do. You have to write a British colonial novel with liberal perspective. And that should be politically correct for the European public. So go back to the question. Whenever you are, in two minds, go back to the question and borrow from the language of the question. E.M. Forster is a liberal. So they are telling you that he was a liberal and he did a study of India as a colony. And you are saying he was publishing a British colonial novel. These are two different things. The rest part of this statement is fine. With an essentially liberal perspective, get rid of the word essentially. We don't need that. Just say liberal. With a liberal perspective, under the conservative eyes of the European public. It's a good addition. This part is a good addition. So he was doing a study of India as a colony under the British Raj with his liberal perspective under the conservative eyes of the European public. You kind of expanded the question. This shows that you have understood the question, the first part of the question. Now the complexity. What is the complexity of colonial discourse? He could neither write a scathing indictment of colony. This is your argument or a judgment. They're asking you to discuss the complexity. You are producing a judgment that this is what happened. You वो ये भी नहीं कर पाया और ये भी नहीं कर पाया. What is the complexity? How the complexity arose? पहले statement में ये complexity. So you could still, to make it better, despite the complexity of previous state, despite the complexity of colonial discourse, yeah, because of the complexity, which is you're saying because of the complexity, he could neither write a scathing indictment of colonialism nor could he legitimize the British Raj. That's a very, very cruel answer, Ria, on E.M. Forster. That neither could he write a scathing indictment nor could he legitimize the British Raj. Okay, let's read further.
That is how it seemed to me.
Okay, let's see if the answer holds your argument. A passage to India begins with the question of possible differentiation between English and characters like Ronnie to outright negative. Statement of issues between cultural differences. However, also goes deeper, giving us liberal collective necessary bridges in the language and printed doctors would forgive it alone when she was out of India. It was said the West concept is extremely different and clear, and they would need a Western trade out man. Basically, the rightness but remains only a unclear idea power and I will always take away. Colonialism both perspective and neither learn or unites in the second. Okay. The complexity of colonial discourse. Let's try and understand that. What is the colonial discourse? Colonial discourse is the Oriental discourse, the Orientalism, the West versus East. Colonial discourse is that Britishers are in India because they're doing business and it's a win-win for both. That's the colonial discourse. What is complexity in that colonial discourse? That it is flawed, it is wrong, it is faulty, but the discourse is there. This is what everyone believes, right? For example, everyone loves Mr. Modi. That's a discourse. What is the complexity in that discourse? It is not 100% true. On ground reality, that statement is not 100% true. So what is the complexity of colonial discourse in his narrative? What is the complexity? Because he has to work with that discourse. He came to India with that discourse in his mind. In Europe, that is a discourse. In India, that discourse was instilled in the Britishers and the British officers. And this was also propagated to the Indians. So what is the complexity in that discourse? Whether Foster was able to show the true picture, that is not the question. Whether he was able to show the true picture, whether he was able to critique the British Raj or not, that is not the question. What is the complexity with which, for example, you go to England and you have a certain discourse in mind that the Britishers are racist, all white men are like that. You have a certain discourse in your mind, and you go to England and you have to write a book. What complexities would you face? When you will see the ground reality is completely different. So when Foster started to write the book with colonial discourse in his mind, in the narrative, we have Cyril Fielding, who's working with the colonial discourses, but then he finds complexities. Think from Cyril Fielding's perspective, Mrs. Moore's perspective, Adela's perspective. Then there are three people who found problems with the colonial discourse and they tried to break it. They tried to discard it. They tried to reject it. But what happened with them? That is the complexity. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Yeah, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Cyril
sir.
Fielding rejected the colonial discourse. Mrs. Moore rejected it. Adela rejected it. What happened? Did it pan out well for them? No. That is the complexity. That is what Foster has tried to underline beautifully. Because if he would have critiqued the British Raj, that would be a one-sided novel. If he would have just stereotyped the Indian scenario, that would be one-sided. He worked with that discourse and he showed the complexity of it. He said it is not a simple scenario. Even though someone like Cyril Fielding who wants to be good cannot be because of this colonial discourse. That's the complexity. Does it make sense, right?
Yes, sir.
So you got the answer slightly misdirectional. Otherwise, it's good, well written. Okay. Orientalism is defined as the depiction of the Eastern culture, heritage, history, and livelihood by the Western civilization. More. Okay, whenever you're writing about Orientalism, always use Edward Said's quote. Anything to do with post-colonialism, Orientalism, East versus West narrative, use, because his book was titled Orientalism, and Orientalism as a word is ascribed to him. There is no counter word for it to be. There is an inward counter word for it. There is a counter word for Orientalism. Orientals and
Occident.
yes. So there is a counter word for it. E. Foster's work has been stated as a counter to the post-colonial theory. The depiction of his character is aligned with the general view of the people of his own orientation. Repeatedly in his book, the Indian characters are confined to being okay, this part is right that there is an Oriental stereotyping. But Foster is doing Oriental stereotyping to install the colonial discourse. So if now we've understood the post-colonial theory, we've understood about what is Oriental stereotyping, what is all that. We can say that Foster was working with the existing colonial discourse. And finding complexities and showcasing the complexity in the colonial discourse, which was accepted as the norm and the standard in the West, in Europe, and in the colonies. That this discourse, whatever we're talking about the colonial setup, the win-win situation, he just showed the complexity, and in doing so, the flaws and problems in it. Right? Orientation also used as a figment at someone's or means, while it might be their own lack of understanding or any interest in it. Okay, this is a very fragmentary answer, Ranveer. Your understanding of Orientalism, how A.M. Foster work has been stated as a counter to the post-colonial theory. What does that mean? How is it a counter to post-colonial theory? As I said, if you were to simplify post-colonial reading, a post-colonial theory, it is the impact of colonialism on the native, the culture, the history, and the life of the natives. This is what post-colonial theory studies. So if passage to India, we look at it from post-colonial theory, the impact of colonialism on the life of Indians. Do we see examples of that in the book or not? We do. Foster has given us a snapshot. Dr. Aziz of India, the story movie around him, the happenings which portrays character, qualities, and opinion. Dr. Aziz style of Oriental is very unique and interesting character, especially when Oriental they combine with the yeah, he's well educated and okay. It's very hospitable, like most people in India, and very pleased to. Okay, break it down into paragraphs. Character sketches like this, you can break them down into bullet points as well. Start with a first paragraph. Again, the first paragraph has to be completely the most powerful, strongest paragraph in argument. And then if you have multiple points about his character sketch, bring it down into smaller paragraphs or bullet points. Never write like big, bulky, long paragraphs, even while you're practicing.
Okay, sir.
और इसमें like UPSC pages, दोनों तरफ lines खींच लो, margins बना लो, and try to write between those. What happened in the cave section? The cave section of the book portrays the main events of the novel written between the storyline. It is almost like an injection of rest of the story. Particularly what happened in the cave is enters it without Mrs. Moore as she retrieves much material. I think it never really is so. Okay. Okay, यहाँ से ये start होता है आपका statement. The cave section portrays the main events of the novel. Full stop. Written between the storyline, it is almost like an injection. Correct me if I am wrong. ये यहाँ से शुरू होके यहाँ पे खत्म होगा statement. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
इतना लंबा sentence यहाँ से लेके यहाँ तक. So it would never make sense. First rule of writing. Write short sentences. Because if you cannot break down what you're trying to say in shorter sentences, it is always going to be confusing. Nobody would be able to read and make sense of this. Right?
Yes, sir. I'll keep that in mind.
Now, what you've done here in this part is you've summarized what happened in the cave section. Exactly what I told you not to do. You've summarized what happens, like literally what happens in the cave section. We are looking for a slightly intelligent, critical assessment of what happened in the cave section. I know it's difficult. Don't worry about it. At least this is a start. This is how everyone starts. So it's good. But you should understand what should be done. Now, thematically, now you're talking about thematically what happened in the cave. This is what we wanted. We didn't want this summary because we know what happened in the cave in terms of the book. We want your critical assessment, your unique critical assessment, right? We don't want the summary. Okay, good start. At least you wrote some answers, which is a very good start, and they are not very far off. Right. Try attempting the rest of the answers. Shivam. Okay, sorry. Okay, let's read this. Fielding views India as a disarray of beliefs, albeit he had sympathy for it. While being in same approach, Aziz regards the Hindu India as a model of chaos. Just symbolically, from Fielding's point of view, Aziz's representation of some model he denies by subtly having some views in deeper whole incident where Aziz was accused. Okay. What is the question? Is Dr. Aziz a symbol of India's model, as Fielding suggests? Have you answered yes, no, maybe, maybe not? Is Dr. Aziz a symbol of India's model? Do you agree with this, as Fielding suggests? So when I start reading an answer, and in the first paragraph or first 10 lines, I don't get an answer to this question. The rest is useless. And I'm absolutely sure that's how UPSC examiners look at the answers. It's like you're sitting in a personal interview with me and I ask you, is Dr. Aziz a symbol of India's model, as Fielding suggests? Now imagine yourself answering like this. Fielding views India as a disarray of beliefs. After about 10 lines, the questioner would interrupt you and he'd repeat it. Listen to the question again. Is Dr. Aziz a symbol of India's model, as Fielding suggests? Do you see the problem? And I know
Ye-
it hurts.
Yes, sir, I understood.
It hurts because you've written an entire page and I'm not going to read any further. But you're going to have to keep writing these entire pages until we get the opening right. Because if you get the opening right, you will get the entire structure falling into place. Read Passage to India with post-colonial theory in mind. Shorter paragraphs, think in terms of points. We don't make bullet points in literature, but we make smaller paragraphs. So if you have 2 points, 3 points, make 2 or 3 smaller paragraphs. Enforcement of ideas, culture, Britishers being portrayed as racist and injustice figures who have enjoyed India as a masses, all portrayed, albeit typically that Foster managed to be liberal. These cases are initially built up for his character. On the other hand, Mrs. Moore character is shown fully compassionate while just being a mother of the family. Successful in portraying a novel as a neutral account of Jack. Not bad, not bad. Considering you've just passed class 12 and you're not used to writing longer answers, this is ostensibly a gentleman representing the mass of India in the full of language. He presents all the natives in conflict with visual class and all of entirely negative with the words. It's also understanding that thoughtful behavior is human. Okay. Good information overall, Shivam. I'm happy. It needs structure.
Thank you, sir, and I'll work on it. And your
Structure.
yes, sir.
Structure as in the good solid intro. Could be a
Okay.
paragraph, could be a statement. And then whatever you're writing, break it down into 2 or 3 points.
So totally understood. I was just thinking to write in a paragraph, but as you have told that break into smaller paragraphs, then I'll work on it.
Yes. And
Yeah.
every paragraph, now let's look at the English language or any language for that matter. This is for everyone. This is for everyone to listen and understand because this is your first answer evaluation class. How does the English language work or any language works? There are 2 parts to it, subject and object. Now, in every statement, there has to be one hero. It could be subject or it could be the object. About that character or hero or thing and something about it. Either a verb or an adjective describing some quality or some action of that. So one thing about that subject or an object, right? That is a statement. So every statement, subject, predicate, every statement has this structure, right? What is a paragraph? One idea. So all the sentences put together drive that one idea. So if you're talking about Dr. Aziz was a hypocrite, that is the idea of your paragraph. So whether you write 2 lines or 3 lines or 4 lines, they should all be driving home that point. Does that make sense? Then what is an entire answer? It is a collection of paragraphs. So all the paragraphs, even though taking separate points, they are all collectively driving home the same point, the same argument, which you gave in your intro. Does that make sense? Character sketch of Dr. Aziz, for example. Let's say you present the argument in the beginning that Dr. Aziz has been portrayed as a typical Oriental, having unstable character, unstable emotions, patronizing British, and generally confused. That is how he has been presented by Foster. That is your argument. So you use 3-4 keywords in it. That is your argument. Now the rest of the answer, different paragraphs, would pick upon one idea, expand upon it, then the second idea, expand upon it, the third idea. But your key point, what is the key point? Key argument. Key argument is that he has been presented as a typical Oriental. So if he has been presented as a confused glot, that is one of the typical traits of an Oriental. So you keep connecting back to your major idea. So in doing that, you will be writing a coherent answer where all the paragraphs link back to the main argument and they all expand that idea or put forward that argument one by one. Does that make sense? That is the structure of good writing, any writing. That is a structure you'll use for your essays. That is a structure you'll use for your GS answers. That is a structure you'll use for anything in this world. Writing an email, writing an essay, writing whatever. Does that make sense with everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Start with the argument, reverse engineer it. Do not first think about the points you have. First, clearly think what is the argument you're going to make. Clearly, that'll require you to read the question again and again. Do you agree that Dr. Aziz is the symbol of India's model? Do you agree with Fielding's view that Dr. Aziz is the symbol of India's model? So what is the question? The question is not asking you to prove whether Dr. Aziz was a model or was he not. The question is asking you to agree or not agree with Fielding's view. If you agree, why? If you don't agree, why? So the question is actually not about Dr. Aziz being a model or not being a model. Do you see how it changes the entire question? If you write about Dr. Aziz being a model, Dr. Aziz not being a model, it's a completely different question. And when you write about, I don't agree with Fielding's view, then you have to write why. Then you bring in Orientalism. Yeah. But if you're just tackling Dr. Aziz as a model or not as a model, then you'll be talking about Dr. Aziz's character sketch. The two different answers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sir, if the question is discuss, what is the argument going to be in the introduction? Because it's not asking us to take a side.
You still have to make an argument. Whether they say discuss, whether they say elaborate, whether they just give you a quote and in the end comment, you still have to present, because that's why they're leaving it open-ended. They want you to come with a stance, a very clear, confident stance. And that clear, confident stance will reveal how much you understood the question and how much you understand the text and how good you are with your writing. It's a test of everything. That is why students are scoring 200, 220 with literature. I see answers like every day, and I've been mentoring these essay students for 23 mains, and I'm looking at their essays. They're written exactly like this, and they're getting 100 out of 250, 90 out of 250. The start is the most important part, because start is the part where you just start. You don't think. We are not trained to think. It is not your fault. We just start. आधा आंसर लिखने के बाद सोचते हैं कि हाँ पॉइंट्स याद कर लिए, ठीक है. We think the first point is very important, second point is very important, third is very important, but we do not think that what are you trying to prove and why. What approach are you taking? Are you very clear and confident about it? So if you say I do not agree with Fielding's view that Dr. Aziz is India's model, you have to tell us why right there. And then what is that why has to be backed by references and examples from the text. It is your opinion doesn't count. And this is another thing I'll tell you today that you might be thinking. They're asking for your opinion, they're asking for your originality, which is what you think, that the UPSC is looking for original answers, originality, unique thinking. No. Your opinion does not count whether you like Foster or not. Your text is your Bible. If you say, I do not agree, first of all, we do not use personal pronouns in the answers. Never write I or we, because your answer is written by you. It is your opinion. You don't have to say, I believe or in my opinion. That is self-conscious writing. Don't do that. So if you say, no, Fielding's view is incorrect, it cannot be agreed, or I don't agree. If you take that don't agree approach, you have to tell them why, because Fielding's view is in Oriental stereotyping. You said Oriental stereotyping. Everything you will say in the support of it has to come from the text. You can't just say कि हाँ मेरे को ऐसा लगता है, मेरे को लगता है कि Dr. Aziz is a very good human being. I felt those vibes from Dr. Aziz. Dr. Aziz was very emotional, very sweet and cute guy. Unless you can back it up from the text, you have enough logical, solid reasoning from the text. Don't just say anything for the sake of it. The original lagega answer. It's your original critical assessment that counts, not your original flimsy, mangadant opinion. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's.
Sir,